Welcome to this comprehensive course on modern poetry. I'm Dr. Mohammed Alwishi from the London College of International Studies. Over the next 3 hours, we're going to embark on a fascinating journey into one of the most revolutionary periods in literary history, the age of modern poetry. This course will transform how you read, understand, and appreciate poetry written in the early 20th century and beyond. Modern poetry presents a dramatic break from everything that came before it, where Victorian and Romantic poets followed established conventions. Modern poets shattered those conventions, where earlier poetry often provided clear moral lessons and beautiful descriptions. Modern poetry embraced ambiguity, fragmentation, and psychological complexity. This wasn't poetry for massive environments. It was poetry that demands active engagement, intellectual effort, and emotional courage. Then we will explore the historical focus that shaped the modern poetry from World War First devastation and individualism, alienation effects. We will analyze the revolutionary techniques poets developed, the free verse, streaming of consciousness, imagism, and deliberate ambiguity. We will read closely some of the most challenging and rewarding poems ever written. And perhaps most importantly, you will develop skills to analyze, interpret, and even write modern poetry yourself. Whether you are a literature student and an aspiring poet, or simply something or someone curious about why modern poetry looks and sounds so different from early verse, this course will provide you with understanding, appreciation, and practical skills. Let's begin this exciting journey together. Course outline. Introduction to modern poetry, the historical and cultural context, characteristics of modern poetry, key poetics or key poetic devices in modern poetry. Case study T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of G. Alfred Prufrock, the role of emotion and subjectivity, modern poetry and language craftsmanship, modern poetry, social and political commentary, selected poems for analysis, guided analysis, how to read a modern poem, activity writing a modernist inspired poem, the importance of modern poetry today, challenges students face with modern poetry, teaching strategies in modern poetry, conclusion embracing the power of modern poetry. Then let's move to learning objectives. Understand the defining characteristics and historical context of modern poetry, identify key poetic devices and techniques used by modern poets, analyze themes of alienation, fragmentation, and identity in modern poetry, appreciate the culture and the social influences shaping a modernist poetic expression. Now let's move to learning outcomes. Students will be able to explain what distinguishes modern poetry from earlier poetic forms. Students will analyze selected modern poems, identifying tune, form, and meaning. Students will connect the historical and cultural events of the early 20th century to poetic themes. Students will demonstrate improved vocabulary and critical thinking through poetry analysis. Now let's move to Introduction to Modern Poetry. Modern poetry emerged in the early 20th century amid rapid social, technological, and cultural upheaval. This revolutionary movement represented a dramatic break from the strict form conventions of Victorian and Romantic poetry, embracing bold experimentation in style, structure, and voice. Why this dramatic break? Modern poets felt that traditional forms were inadequate for experiencing and experiencing modern experience. How could you capture the chaos of trench warfare in neat rhythmic or rhyming couplets? How would you express urban alienation in pastoral, natural imagery? How Could you convey psychological fragmentation in logical linear narrative? The modernists believed new times required new forms. Themes and demands. The modernist poets sought to capture the fragmented, disjointed experience of contemporary life. They reflected the uncertainty of an anxiety of a world transformed by industrialization, urbanization, and the devastating impact of World War. Um, First, the key themes include alienation, fragmentation of self, loss of faith, and the persistent search for meaning in an increasingly chaotic world. Lit. These poets challenged readers with complex imagery, ambiguous speakers, and unconventional structures that demanded active engagement and interpretation. Reading modern poetry isn't like reading earlier bears where you can follow along passively. Modern poetry requires you to work, to puzzle over meanings, to track illusions, to accept ambiguity, to construct interpretations rather than simply receiving messages. This challenging quality was deliberate. Modern poetry delivered or believed that easy art uh, falsified modern experience. Life was difficult, fragmented, uncertain, so art should be too. Only by making their poem challenging could they honestly represent a modern reality. Now let's go to the influential modernist poets. T.S. Eliot, master of illusion and fragmentation, Ezra Pound, pioneer of imagism, H.D. Hilda Doolittle, innovative simplist. Wallace Stevens, explorers of reality and imagination. Marie Moore, a defender of poetic innovation. These poets, while quite different from each other, shared commitments to experimentation, difficulty, and revolutionary approaches to poetic form and content. Now let's go to the historical and cultural context. To truly understand the modern poetry, we must immerse ourselves in the tumultuous world that birthed it. The early 20th century witnessed unprecedented change that shattered long-held assumptions about progress, order, and human nature itself. This wasn't a gradual evolution, but a revolutionary transformation. Within a few decades, the Western world changed more dramatically than in previous centuries. These changes weren't just external, they fundamentally altered how people understood themselves, their societies, and their place in the universe. Modern poetry both reflected and responded to their transformation. Now let's go to the four major historical forces. Industrial revolution's impact. The rise of industrial cities and technological advances transformed daily life, creating both marvel and alienation. World War First, 1914 to 1918, the Great War destroyed illusions of human progress and rational civilization, leaving profound disillusionment. Cultural awakening, 1910 Virginia Woolf famously claimed human nature underwent a fundamental change on or about December 1910. Modernism emerged. Artists responded to fragmentation was fragmentation, created the works that reflected the unstable, chaotic new reality. Rather than imposing false order. If experience was fragmented, art should be fragmented. It means was. If meaning was uncertain, art should be ambiguous. This wasn't nihilism, but honestly or honesty representing reality as it actually felt rather than as people wished it were. Now let's move to from order to chaos. The sense of chaos and illusionment replaced the 19th century optimism and orderly worldview. Modernism emerged as a response to a fragmented, unstable world marked by the loss of clear identity, traditional values, and certainty about the future. Poetic became witness to and chronicles of this profound cultural transformation. They documented the psychological impact of these changes, the anxiety the anxiety, alienation, and the fragmentation that characterized modern uh, consciousness, but they also sought in their poetry possibilities for meaning, beauty, and connection, even in this fractured world. Modern poetry is often pessimistic, but it's not simply despairing. It's searching for ways to make art and meaning in unprecedented conditions. Now let's go to the characteristics of modern poetry introduction. Modern poetry is distinguished by a radical departure from traditional forms and conventions. These aren't just stylistic quirks, but fundamental reimaginings of what poetry could be and do. These characteristics work together to create a new poetic language capable of expressing the complexity of modern experience that traditional forms seemed inadequate to capture. Now let's move to the free verse revolution and the fragmentation. Free verse revolution, use of free verse and unconventional forms, breaking forms, strict meter and rhythm and rhyme schemes. Poets liberated themselves from traditional constraints to find new rhythms reflecting contemporary speech and thought patterns. Fragmented narrative structure, and disjointed imagery reflecting the chaotic, discontinuous nature of modern experience. Liner storytelling gives way to collage like assemblage of moments and impressions, deliberate ambiguity, and multiple layers of meaning, inviting diverse interpretations. Modern poems resist singular, definitive readings, and instead opening spaces for reader participation in creating meaning. Earlier, poetry often had clear meanings and moral lessons. Modern poetry embraced interpretive openness. Different readers could legitimately understand poems differently, and this uh, Plurality was available and valuable, not problematic. Now let's go to the psychological depth and the complex devices. Emphasis on individual perception, consciousness, and psychological complexity. Influenced by Freudian's psychology, poets explored the inner working of the mind, complex devices, frequent use of symbolism, literary and historical illusion, and layered irony to create rich, intellectually demanding texts. Modern poets zoomed educated readers who knew classical methodology, religious texts, earlier literature. They backed poems with illusions that created complex webs of meaning. Each reference adding resonance, creating ballads or parallels between past and present, demanding thematic implications. This intellectual density is part of the modern poetry's difficulty. To fully appreciate the wasteland, you need to catch illusions to Dante speakers. The Bible, Buddhist texts, Arthurian legend, and much more. This can seem elitist and critical, and the critics have certainly raised this concern, but modernists defended it by arguing that poetry should draw on the full richness of cultural tradition, not dump itself down to the lowest common denominator. Now let's go for the key poetic devices in modern poetry introduction. Modern poets developed and defined specific techniques that became hallmarks of the movement. Understanding these devices is essential for analyzing and appreciating modernist verse. These aren't just tricks or ornaments, but fundamental tools for expressing modern experience in new ways. Let me detail the most important techniques. Imagism, a stream of consciousness, and juxta, juxtaposition. Imagism, precise, clear, and sharp images that capture movements and moments with photographic clarity. Ezra's Bounds' famous two-line poem in A Station of the Metro exemplifies this techniques, presenting a vivid image without explanation of sentimentality. A stream of consciousness, interior monologue capture the flood, associative nature of human thought. T.S. Eliot's The Love Song of J. Alfred Brofrock pioneered this technique, moving seamlessly through the speaker's anxious ruminations, juxtaposition, and collage, placing the disparate images, ideas, and the cultural references side by side to create new meanings through contrast and connection. This technique mirrors the fragmented nature of modern experiences. Urban life constantly throws together unrelated elements. Elio, the wasteland, is essentially a vast collage, a juxtaposition or juxtaposing scenes from contemporary London with Shakespeare's quotations, fragments or popular songs, Buddhist scripture, and much more. Meaning emerges from the relationships between these fragmented or fragments rather than from linear development. Now let's go to enjambments and symbolism. Enjambment, a regular line breaks, and sentences flowing across lines to disrupt traditional rhythmic patterns and create tension between grammatical and visual structure, symbolism and myth, reference to mythology, literature, and history to deepen thematic resonance and create connections between past and present. Modern poets were deeply engaged with tradition, even as they broke from traditional forms. By invoking myths and literary precedents, they suggested that current experiences connected to timeless human patterns, while also showing how the present differed from the past. Myth provided the structures and the parallel that helped organize otherwise chaotic modern experience. Eliot uses fertility myths in the wasteland to structure his portrait of spiritual barrenness. Joyce used the Odyssey to create to structure Ulysses or Ulysses. This technique using myth to organize modern material became characteristic of high modernism. Now let's go to case study. T.S. Eliot, the love song of J. Alfred uh, Prufrock. Let's go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. T.S. Eliot's groundbreaking 1915 poem serves as a perfect introduction to modernist techniques and themes through the anxious consciousness of Junior Alfred Prufrock. Eliot captures the paralyzes and alienation of modern urban life. The poem is a dramatic monologue. Brofrock is speaking apparently to someone else, or perhaps to himself, as he contemplates whether to attend a social gathering and whether to declare some kind of feeling to a woman or to a woman there. But the poem is really about paralysis, about inability to act or connect. Prufrock obsesses over trivial social anxieties, his bald spot, his thin arms, whether he dares eat a peach while never actually doing anything. The poem perfectly captures modern alienation and the internal obstacles that prevents authentic human connection. Now let's go to alienation and indecision. The poem explores a profound alienation and chronic indecision in a fragmented modern world. Prufrock cannot act, cannot connect, cannot resolve his existential uncertainties. The poem captured the paralysis of overthinking, of excessive self-consciousness that prevents spontaneous action and authentic feeling. Prufrock is trapped in his own head, analyzing himself too relentlessly that he cannot simply be or act. This reflexive self-consciousness is characteristic of modern alienation. Now let's go to the rich illusions. Eliot employs illusions in Dante's Inferno, Shakespeare's Hamlet, and biblical texts, creating a complex web of literary and cultural references that deepen the poem's meaning. Um, these illusions create ironic contrasts between grand literary precedents and Prufrock's mundane contemporary anxieties, where Dante's speaker is literally in hell. Prufrock is in a drawing room, but experiences it as a hellfish or a hellish, where Hamlet faces the genuine tragic dilemmas. Prufrock faces trivial social anxieties, yet feels them as paralyzing. The illusions both elevate and mock Prufrock experience. Fragmented self and innovative form. The speaker's fragmented consciousness and pervasive sense of paralysis reflects the modernist theme of the dividend or divided, uncertain self unable to find the wholeness of or meaning. Reading Brofrock requires patience and multiple encounters. Each reading reveals new layers of meaning, new connections, and new insights into the modern condition. The first reading you might find confusing: who is speaking? Where are we? What's happening? Subsequent readings reveal the poem's intricate organization, patterns, its patterns of imagery, fog measuring, drawing. It's a careful structure beneath apparent randomness. This is a characteristic of modern poetry difficulty that rewards sustained attention. Now let's go to innovative form. The poem's innovative form, mixing dramatic monologue, free verse, and the stream of consciousness, because or became a hallmark and model for modernist poetry. Now let's go to the role of emotion and subjectivity. While modern poetry may appear intellectual and difficult, at its core lies profound emotional depth. Modern poets revolutionized how poetry could express the full complexity of human feeling. They didn't abandon emotion, they found new, more authentic ways to express it that rejected Victorian sentimentality in favor of genuine psychological complexity. This is a crucial point because students sometimes think a modern poetry is cold or merely cerebral. In fact, modern poetry is intensely emotional. It just expresses emotion differently than earlier verse did, in a way that felt more honest and psychologically accurate to modern poets. Now let's go to language of the soul. Modern poetry functions as language of the soul, expressing complex human emotions that often resist straightforward articulation. Poets found new ways to convey feelings of anxiety, despair, hope, and the introspection that captured the psychological complexity of modern life. They draw on emerging psychological theories, Freud's unconscious, Jung's archetypes, William James' stream of consciousness to understand and represent inner life more fully. Poetry became a kind of psychological document charting inner landscapes with precision previously reserved for external description. Now let's move to the movement away from sentimentality. I'm talking about from sentimentality to authenticity. The movement away from sentimentality toward emotional authenticity marked a crucial shift. Poets sought genuine expression rather than conventional emotional display. This doesn't mean modern poetry is unemotional. It means that the emotions are real, complex, often uncomfortable, rather than comfortingly familiar. Bro Fox and anxiety is genuinely anxious, not pre Tiffid, the spire is in the wasteland, is genuinely disappearing. The emotional authenticity might be harder to access than a Victorian sentiment, but it's more psychologically true. Now let's move to therapeutic and cathartic power. Poetry serves as a therapeutic and a cathartic medium for both writer and reader. By articulating difficult emotions and experiences, poets create spaces for processing trauma, loss, and uncertainty. Modern poetry encourages empathy and connection through shared human experiences, even when addressing alienation. Poems create communities of readers who recognize themselves in the work. When you read Borrowed Frog's anxieties and think, yes, I felt that way. You've experienced a connection despite the poem theme of disconnection. Literature creates community through shared recognition. This therapeutic dimension shouldn't be overstated. Poetry isn't therapy, but it does provide genuine psychological value. It helps us understand and articulate feelings. It shows us we're not alone in our struggles. It gives a form of chaotic experience. These are valuable human functions. Thank you so much for watching me teaching you the first session of modern poetry. We'll continue tomorrow talking about the reflection prompts. Thank you so much. Until next time, tata for now.